What's up, guys? I'm Sci-Hi. It's been a couple weeks since my last video, and during that time we have had some absolutely extraordinary developments in both historic and the standard Alchemy metagames, and it's all thanks to the printing of two powerful new Alchemy new Capenna cards in Racketeer Boss and Cabaretti Revels. And when I say printing, I guess I should really say the coding of, because these of course are digital only cards and they aren't printed. But just want to say one thing. If you're already familiar with this deck and the concept and the combo, please stick around, because I'm going to be showing a historic version of this deck that is much lesser known, and I actually think is even more busted and consistent and over the top than this deck. So definitely stick around. But we'll cover this deck real quick just in case others haven't seen it yet. So a little bit of history. A few weeks ago, popular content creator and great player Alf has went a little bit viral, sharing this deck that they reached number 1 on the ladder with, sharing it to Twitter, as well as a great write-up and video on the concept. Definitely check out their article on MTG Arena Zone, as well as their video on the deck. So I'll just briefly cover it real quick because they've already covered it so well, and then we can dive in and look at this other historic version that, like I said, I think is even more busted than this. But the whole concept, of course, revolves around Grinning Ignus, which of course was always a combo card with Birgi, God of Storytelling, where you cast Grinning Ignus, you get a red mana for casting it, and you can infinitely loop and return this to your hand and keep recasting it. And then, of course, Abuse enters the battlefield, triggers to either do damage to your opponent or gain a ton of life, or you go off with a crazy storm count or something. Now, this never really got to like tier 1 or crazy status because it was slow, and these cards suck otherwise when they're in a vacuum if you're trying to play a fair game. And it was just so reliant on Birgi, which isn't that fantastic as a card by itself. But all of this changed again with the coding of these two new cards, and public enemy number 1 is Racketeer Boss. So for a red-green 3/2 creature enters the battlefield, you perpetually give up to two creatures in your hand the ability that when they are cast, you create a treasure token. So naturally, you cast Racketeer Boss and you choose Grinning Ignus. Now Grinning Ignus creates a treasure token every time it's cast. Thus, now you have a red mana, and you can just keep looping this forever, or at least insofar as you can hit spacebar and get through these triggers on MTG Arena. So with this deck, that's basically pseudo-infinite life with Lunarch Veteran, as well as Prosperous Innkeeper. Even if you don't have the combo going off, this deck can play a fair game where you're just gaining a lot of life triggers, maybe not even infinite, and you're just getting huge Voice of the Blast or huge Trelasara Moon Dancers and beating your opponent that way. So it can play a respectable game even when it's not comboing off. But when you absolutely do combo off and you can loop Grinning Ignus infinite amount of times, if you have Cabaretti Revels in play, which says whenever you cast a creature spell, seek a creature card with lesser mana value, then put it onto the battlefield. This means now you are going to deterministically be able to seek every creature card in your deck under 3 mana as you're looping Ignus. It's going to continually keep finding all of these other creatures, and notably there's 1 copy of Dina Soul Steeper. So once this goes off, eventually you're going to find the 1 copy of Dina Soul Steeper, which says whenever you gain life, each opponent loses a life. So that's going to just drain out your opponent in a more or less infinite way. Now, it's worth noting also that Cabaretti Revels is just a really strong card, even when you're not abusing it in this way. For instance, like even if it's just a draw card, that would be not that bad. But the fact that you're seeking a creature card immediately and putting it directly onto the battlefield is extremely powerful. Now, this is a deck that I abused and kind of used towards the end of the season to secure top 1200, and many others have done the same thing, whether top 250 or top 1200. So the deck is definitely going viral a bit and making itself known in standard Alchemy. And I definitely expect bans to come, or at least reconfigurations. I guess they wouldn't really ban these cards, but notably, I could see them reconfiguring Racketeer Boss in a way that's not so busted and allows you to loop in this way, because this really is the #1 problem. Racketeer Boss is the enabler for such shenanigans such as this. The rest of the deck is just strong cards, like Inquisitor Captain, to just further continue finding the combo. Now, the way to beat something like this, of course, we can use things like Archon of Emeria, which limits the amount of spells a player can cast per turn to 1. So that will shut off the looping, as well as something like Rampaging Ferocidon for all you red mages out there, red deck wins, aggressive decks. Rampaging Ferocidon, of course, limits life gain, which is huge, so it'll shut off all of the life gain and huge growing potential of Voice of the Blessed and Trail of Sara. But it'll also do damage every time a creature enters the battlefield. So for all these Grinning Ignus abusers and players, such as myself right now, Rampaging Ferocidon, awesome tech if you're a red mage. I would consider putting them in your deck if you're not abusing this combo right now, because you're going to deal damage to your opponent every time Grinning Ignus comes down, and it's going to make them being able to combo off virtually impossible. But alright, so enough about this deck. Let's take a look at the historic version, or at least a historic version, because there are many different versions of this deck floating around. People are trying all different kinds of iterations. But first, got to give credit where credit is due. Thank you to Binary Soloist, who shared this deck on Twitter, as well as lots of information about it, an impressive ranking in top 250, I believe. And I've just started to explore and experiment with this deck so far in this new season in Historic. I have not come up against the mirror match yet. I have come up against the other version that we looked at just previously, the version that Alth had shared. But this version, I believe, is perhaps even more busted and just broken. So the difference with this version is that we are pretty much all in on the combo. So one weakness is we don't really have a backup game plan per se in this deck. We can't pump up like a Voice of the Blessed and kind of win in a pseudo fair way. We're all in on the combo, but that's okay, because if you're playing best of one and you just want to grind really fast, I've already been rising nearly to diamond just after an hour or two of play with this, and expect it to continue until more people start to tech against this. So let's take a look at what makes this version tick and how is it different. So like I said, this version is pretty much all in on the combo. We have similar things going on. We've got the Birgi, or Birgi, however the hell it's pronounced. Only 2 copies this time. We're not as all in on Birgi because it's a little bit slower to combo off with. But of course, we've got the 4 Ignus, we've got the 4 Cabaretti Revels, and we've got the 4 Racketeer Boss. So that similarity exists. But the difference is now we're going to incorporate some different ways to win and different ways to assemble the combo even more quickly than the previous deck. And to do that, we've got Neoform to assemble the right pieces, as well as Grapeshot for the finisher. So before we look at each individual card and talk about some different nuances and how you would want to use each card, let's just talk about the powerful ways you win and the most common ways you win, the common play patterns. So there are many ways to win on turn 3 with this deck, which is absolutely insane. But even more insane than that, and what I find absolutely extraordinary, is that this deck kind of has built-in resiliency to like spot removal and interactivity from your opponent in such a way that once you combo off, they don't even receive priority, and they can't even kill or stop your Ignus, and you just continue to combo off. And the reason for that is because, unlike the previous deck, this deck has only 1 creature enter the battlefield effect. So what happens is, when you're comboing off with this deck, with Grinning Ignus, you're paying a red and you're returning Grinning Ignus to your hand as an activation to get that 3 mana. So when you do that, it's immediately going to your hand. So that means your opponent, they can't, fatal push, they can't use anything to kill the Grinning Ignus because it's already in your hand. Now, when you recast it, they of course could counterspell it, but they can't use creature removal to kill it, because once it's on the battlefield and it resolves, priority now returns to you, the person that cast the Grinning Ignus. And you can just continually loop in this way, and the opponent literally can't stop you. They can't stop that effect with creature removal. The second you have creatures with enter the battlefield triggers, like the Soul Sisters type things that gain life that we looked at in the previous deck, that will then give your opponent a window of opportunity to kill this. So for that reason, we don't actually do that in this deck. We don't have any crazy like pseudo infinite life gain. We're just going all in on the combo to kill them. So the common ways to win on turn 3 include some of the following. Turn 1, nothing besides just playing a land. Turn 2, you may play Racketeer Boss, of course, with Grinning Ignus in your hand, and giving it the perpetual ability to, when you cast Ignus, get a treasure token. So now on turn 3, you play Grinning Ignus, and you're able to loop it forever as many times as you need to. The last time you loop it, or return it to your hand rather, you're going to get that 3 mana, including 1 red, which is important. Assuming you have Grapeshot in your hand on turn 3, now you can Grapeshot your opponent for pseudo infinite damage and win on turn 3 that way. Another way to win on turn 3 would be turn 1, play a mana dork such as Llanowar Elves or Gilded Goose, into turn 2 Racketeer Boss. Again, of course, this being really the most important card of the deck, besides Ignus, of course. So turn 2, Racketeer Boss, of course, on Ignus. Turn 3, we play a Reckless Fireweaver, which says, whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under our control, Reckless Fireweaver deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then, of course, on turn 3, we just do the loop and win that way. Also, old school way to win on turn 3, not using any of the new cards. You could just have a turn 1 mana dork straight into a turn 2 Birgi, followed by a turn 3 Ignus, looping it the old-fashioned way, getting the cast trigger red mana, and then, of course, finishing with a massive Grapeshot for the win that way, for a third way to win on turn 3. In terms of talking about turn 4 wins, there are even more avenues to victory that way. I won't cover all of them, but with Cabaretti Revels in play, similar to the last deck, you can deterministically win. Once you have Cabaretti Revels in play, like I said, it's just a powerful card, even when you're not abusing it and looping infinite cast triggers from Ignus. But if you are, once you have Revels in play and you infinitely loop Ignus, every time, of course, you're seeking one of the creatures with less than 3 mana. So it's going to just start spilling and putting into play all the mana dorks, maybe more Racketeer Bosses. But most importantly, it's going to keep putting Fireweavers in play, and you're just going to kill the opponent that way by continuing to cast Ignus, getting those treasures over and over again, which is going to trigger and translate into damage to the opponent each time. Interesting thing about that way to win, which would happen on turn 4 or later, is that even if your opponent has creature removal for this, maybe they have a couple, 1 or 2 ways to kill a creature. Again, they're not going to be able to kill this, the Ignus, because you're already, it's never in, they don't have an opportunity to, because you cast this, you get the treasure, that's what deals the damage. They just simply don't have priority when this is in play, and you can always return it to your hand before they get priority. But they can, however, have priority to kill the Reckless Fireweavers. But the problem for the opponent is that if you have this loop going, even if they have 1 or 2 creature removal and enough mana to even use them in the early game, you're just going to continually keep doing this and find the additional copies of Fireweaver. So they can't possibly slog through and kill all 4 copies of this that early in the game when you're looping in this way. And even if they do, you've got the backdoor Grapeshot to the face avenue of victory. So this is really powerful, and I don't remember the last time, if ever, I've ever seen not only such a powerful, disgustingly simple looping infinite combo, but also the ability to kind of resist common interaction and creature kill that would otherwise stop something as powerful as this. Just, it's really remarkable that your opponent doesn't have the priority to deal with the Ignis, where they do in the previous deck. And that's what I think makes this deck just extraordinarily powerful. That being said, again, we can talk about bans or reconfigurations. I fully expect them, Wizards, to probably do something in the not so distant future about Racketeer Boss, because this card is just, it enables such disgusting gameplay with Grinning Ignus. And this has all the hallmarks of something to get banned or at least reconfigured and nerfed in Alchemy, because not only is it's extremely powerful and consistent, it has that going for it, but it's just hell. It's horribly not good for gameplay. To give you an example, when you're doing one of those turn 3 kills that I described earlier, your opponent may be familiar and recognize, oh, okay, they're comboing off, and he's looping Grinning Ignus, but maybe you don't have, you know, the Fireweaver or something in play yet. So your opponent might just think you're just messing around, like, what the hell is this person doing? They're just looping this. Because unlike paper Magic, where you could just show your hand and be like, hey, like, I've got a Grapeshot, unless you have some way to like stop this and counter all the storm triggers, etc. Like, I'm going to just Grapeshot you for the win. On Arena, we can't do that. We can't share our hand and be like, hey, look, you know, I've got the cards, you're dead. So your opponent has to just sit there, and they might be at, like, you know, 20 life or worse if they have their own gain life effects. So you're having to do this loop at least, you know, 19, 20 times to get the amount of storm triggers necessary to go lethal with Grapeshot. And your opponent has to keep you honest, and they have to sit there and wait to see that you actually have the Grapeshot. So that's just horrible. That's stupid gameplay. It's not fun. It's not fun for anyone. And most people, you know, if they're just so sick of this, they might quit early. And that gives you this weird kind of pseudo mind game where you could actually like trick your opponent and just start looping Ignis. And maybe you don't even have the Grapeshot, but they're just so disgusted that they don't want to sit and wait for you to do this 20 times. And they might just concede, and you can get away with actually bluffing that you have the game locked up when you don't. But spoiler alert, most of the time you do have the game locked up because this deck is just extremely broken. So I think we've covered like the main things, that just how this deck ticks and why it's so busted. So let's just quickly cover the rest of the cards and choices here. Like I said, I was first tipped off of this deck by Binary Soloist. I've only played a couple hours so far of the deck, but it already feels extremely busted just in the couple hours I've played. And I'm going to share with you what I think some of the common play patterns and how to play this should be based on my limited experience with the deck so far. But so you've got 8 mana dorks, and it might seem a little weird, like why are we really accelerating? The acceleration absolutely helps. Don't get me wrong. Possibly playing Birgi on turn 2, Cabaretti Revels just on turn 2 is just a strong play in general. And it's just something to get extra value out, get this early. It's not a ton of main deck enchantment hate, so this can kind of just get out there and snowball out of control if you get this out on turn 2. So that's always a good play. But generally, I think mulliganing aggressively is definitely worth it for this deck. It's not so much about card quantity. It's really more about just having the right cards. Because again, we're just all in on the combo here. We just want to combo off as fast as possible, win the game with no removal besides Grapeshot of our own. We're very susceptible to getting hated out by, again, things like Archon of Emeria, Rampaging Ferocidon, Strict Proctor, etc. So we want to just find the pieces as fast as possible and kill the opponent. So we've got these mana dorks, which can facilitate getting these 3-drops out a lot faster. But more importantly, what they do is they provide fodder and material to sacrifice with Neoform. So with Neoform, of course, being a really powerful combo enabler in Historic for quite some time now. With Neoform, 2 mana, we sacrifice a creature and we search for another creature with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrifice creature's mana value, and it gets a +1/+1 counter also for our efforts. So most often what I've been finding myself doing with Neoform is, the most common play is that I'm Neoforming and sacrificing one of the mana dorks to most often go for Racketeer Boss in this case. and hopefully we've got Ignus in hand. So we get Racketeer Boss, we find that, and we give the Ignus its perpetual ability to create treasure tokens. In addition, Neoform, you can also sacrifice the Racketeer Boss as well, maybe a Fireweaver, to then, of course, find either an Ignus or a Birgi. Most often, you're going to be trying to find your key card in the Ignus, which is okay to put it directly into play, even if it doesn't have its perpetual ability yet from Racketeer Boss, because you just want to find it and have access to this. And then, there could be a window of opportunity where your opponent can kill it, depending on your mana situation. But most often, you want to find Ignus, get it back in your hand, and get it equipped up with the Racketeer Boss's perpetual ability. So Neoform just helps smooth out and find the necessary piece. There are other niche situations where you might want to find Birgi and combo off that way. Maybe you have other things you need, but you're just trying to accelerate damage and you get Reckless Fireweaver. But I think the most conventional and common play, based again on my limited experience with decks, seems to be, trying to Neoform and get Racketeer Boss into play straight away and get that perpetual ability on the Ignus. So we've covered these mana dorks: Neoform, Racketeer Boss. Reckless Fireweaver is your deterministic way to win the game. Grapeshot, backdoor victory as well, and one of the most common ways to win on turn 3. Another awesome card floating around the deck. 4 copies of Expressive Iteration. Again, this card has been just an absolute beast of an all-star card in many different formats now. Recently getting banned in Explorer, I believe. This card, of course, many people will play this after turn 3 or greater to maximize card drawing and card value efficiency by exiling a land, playing the land on turn 3. That's, of course, a strong, powerful play here. But I find it okay to even play this as early as turn 2 if you don't have anything else to do. Just to look at 3 cards and just find the absolute important piece that you need. Because again, I really don't think we're not that caring about card advantage here. And there's a lot of ways we can snowball out of control and recover if we're down on cards with things such as Cabaretti Revels, etc., to just really go over the top and get extraordinary value from these cards. So I have found I'm not afraid to just cast this on turn 2, even if I know I'm not going to be able to cast anything off of it, but just getting to look at 3 cards and taking the most important card and putting it in my hand to set up the next turn or 2 to combo off that way. So Expressive Iteration, you really can't go wrong. It's just a powerful card. We're already in blue because of Neoform being so powerful to help enable this combo as well. So I fully endorse. I see this as definitely a good addition here. It certainly smooths out the deck for sure and helps you find exactly what you need. So hard to argue against an Expressive Iteration being here. And then, of course, on the top end, we already talked about Birgi, Grinning Ignus, Cabaretti Revels, which is just such a strong card. Again, even if you're not abusing it, but it just generates so much value, and then it gives you another deterministic way to win and just find every creature in your deck, less than 3. But one other thing about Birgi, remember that it does have the other mode or the other side of Harnfell, Horn of Bounty, which is actually totally legitimate, fine play. If you're running out of gas or up against control and they're just 1-for-1ing everything, don't be afraid to just cast this for 5 mana. Get the horn out there. Its ability is pretty strong, being able to discard a card and exile the top 2 cards of your library and being able to play those. Just means that you're going to be actually just fully gassed, not going to run out of things to do if the game turns into just a grind. This can help you just get there against control and find what you need. And then, of course, we've got a Jegantha companion. Really nothing to say. It's just there because we can. Whatever. It's a 5/5 body. Just something more to do. Not much really to say about it other than it's a companion. So why not if we can do it? Lands. Again, also not much to say here. Just we've got all the Temur lands. 1 copy of Boseiju floating around for dealing with, Solemnity, other difficult enchantments or artifacts, or non-basic lands that our opponents may have. Get to pretty much just run one copy for free. So that's the deck. It seems extraordinarily powerful. If you know, I just want to spread awareness of this deck because I'm surprised that I'm really not facing the mirror match yet in Historic. But I think it won't be long before the cat really gets out of the bag. I mean, it kind of is already before this goes even more viral. And if you don't plan on abusing this and running this deck yourself, I think it's worthwhile to just be aware of it. If you're running mono red, you know, you might want to think about packing Rampaging Ferocidon in your deck because that's just not a strong card in any case, but it completely shuts down these combos because your opponent can't gain life, so it'll screw the last deck we looked at, but it'll also screw this deck because this deck can't function if it's taking 1 damage every time it tries to loop Ignis. So Rampaging Ferocidon, excellent card. If you're mono red or kind of a red aggro deck, definitely consider running that. One interesting thing about when a big breakout deck like this comes out based on new cards, I find it a great opportunity to just exploit this and climb the ladder quickly and just farm opponents that aren't ready for this and just haven't been exposed to it yet. So I think this is a great choice right now. I'm going to continue jamming this deck. But again, if you don't have the wild cards, definitely be aware of it. And depending on how quickly this explodes in popularity, and I absolutely expect it to, it's too powerful to ignore. It really is. And so if you're not running it, I strongly suggest running the hate cards. I think the best strategy is proactive strategy against this deck. Again, Archon of Emeria, Rampaging Ferocidon, Strict Proctor. Lots of spot removal isn't as good. It's like I said, it won't work against this if you don't have priority. So this deck can resist spot removal to some extent. Lots of discard effects can be good against this deck, when it's just thought seizing and picking apart the necessary combo pieces, but that's not where I would want to be. I'd rather be the player that has this powerful thing going on rather than the person that's just trying to line up thought seizes and hopefully they hit the right cards. Because if your only plan against this is just discard, you're always going to be at the mercy of what's on the top of your opponent's deck, and you can just get punked out and lose on the spot to this deck. It's got also that going for it, where it's one of those things where it can win out of nowhere with no board state whatsoever. Your opponent might not even know what deck you are yet, because you play cards on the first turn that exist in many other Neoform type decks, as well as just like your opponent might just see a Llanowar Elf and a Stomping Ground on turn 1, and they might just think you're Gruul aggro. They have no idea that you're running this crazy, insane combo deck at that point. So you can kind of fly under the radar that way a little bit, and it's just an extraordinary powerful deck. So appreciate you guys watching the video till the end. Definitely comment, like, and subscribe if you aren't already. Follow us along here while this channel continues to grow and we explore extremely powerful decks and concepts like this. But let me know in the comments, who has faced this on the ladder yet? Have you experimented with your own versions? There's certainly versions of this deck that can be red-green only, that abuse some other cards as well, that I haven't even talked about. But I think this is one of the most disgusting versions of this combo I've seen yet. It's just so consistent. So definitely, if you're going to play it, good luck, and good luck on the ladder for as long as it takes. I don't know when. Like I said, I expect this to be banned or reconfigured because it's just too crazy. So, but I'm really curious if you've already played this or you played other versions. Let me know in the comments. Share lists, share what you've seen or what other people are doing to try to fight against this or to innovate this, because it's one of the most extraordinary decks I've ever played, honestly, guys. You gotta, if you haven't seen this yet, you gotta be aware of it. And if you're playing standard Alchemy, it's no secret the Alchemy cards are busted. Not just these, but many of the other ones are extremely powerful as well that we haven't even talked about in some of the other colors. So if you're playing standard Alchemy, and you're not playing the Alchemy cards, well, obviously you're doing it wrong. You might as well just play Standard. But if you are Standard Alchemy, definitely exploit and use these Alchemy cards because they're completely insane. And it's crazy how much this has affected Historic just already. Just this early on when these cards haven't even been out that long. And now we've got the D&D set coming out. Haven't even looked at the spoiler of that yet, so it'll be interesting to see what that does for Historic. But anyways, I'm rambling on. So again, guys, I'm Sci-Hi. Definitely subscribe if you're not already. It looks like most of the viewers of this channel, we have many of them, but they're not all subscribed, and that makes me sad. So please subscribe, share this video, share the deck, because more people need to know about this. I'm surprised it hasn't caught on fire faster, frankly. It's just that powerful. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoy this deck and a look at this powerful new combo from Alchemy New Capenna in various formats. And if you're playing ladder this season, definitely good luck on it as always. And peace, guys.